What's up, YouTube, and welcome to Codename Scream. I am your host, Chris, also known as That Horror Guy. You may or may not recognize my face from filling in at the live streams and occasionally as a co-host on Codename Reaction. I've provided a link in the description for this video below. Make sure to go check them out, like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications on them if you haven't already. I can tell you without a doubt, they are the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. That's the real horror show over here. We just kind of pretend to be a horror show here. They're the real deal. So make sure to go check that out. But with that being said, welcome to episode 1. So what am I doing here exactly? Well, obviously we're going to focus on all things horror. We're going to talk about the timeless classics, the brutal serial killers, the things that we grew to love as horror fans, or people that may be curious as to what's going on with them exactly. But not only that, we're going to focus on the true crime, the people that truly made the nightmares reality, and in some cases actually were worse than anything that Hollywood would ever come up with. And what we're going to do is we're going to take someone from each, and we're going to put them up against each other head to head, if it were a real life scenario, in a way. We're going to base it sort of off of a specific collegiate sporting event that people enjoy that involves brackets. Same thing here. We're going to call this a SLASHETHON, actually. So, for episode 1, I wanted to make sure I reached in deep and got the most disgusting, terrible 2 things I could think of. Oh, wait. No. That is terrible. But what could be worse than that? Well, without further ado, let me introduce our first candidate for the horror side. Buzzing in straight from Texas, we have Bubba Sawyer, or as we all have grown to know and love him as, Leatherface, from the 1974 classic The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And representing the real-life terrible person, well, drum roll please, we have the Butcher of Plainfield, Gein. So, how we're going to go ahead and do this, I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, just a quick overview, things that I found interesting, and then we're going to go into, at the end, we're going to have a points scenario, and give some, take some, we'll see how it goes, but let's get to that point. So, Leatherface, 1974, Tobe Hooper, Kim Henkel made one of the most, at the point, controversial films of all time. Also gave us one of the most notable movie slashers of all time with Leatherface. This is one of my personal all-time favorites. Oh, yeah, if that wasn't already, obvious. But this film was one of the first ones I actually sat through as a child and actually creeped me out quite a bit. It took a really long time for me to be able to sit down and actually stomach this one down. But with that film, in 1974, when it was released, it was banned in multiple countries. Some of those bans weren't lifted until some point in the 90s even. Tobe Hooper went on to make many more horror films, but this one would probably be the most notable simply on the fact of just the shock value. And for 1974, no one had really seen anything like this on a major motion picture screen. You saw it in a lot of smaller theaters with films such as like Blood Feast and the Herschel Gordon Lewis gore films. But so, story behind Texas Chainsaw Massacre, most of us already know, but in case you didn't know, surrounds Sally Hardesty, 3 of her friends, and her invalid brother Franklin. They are going to go see their grandfather's gravesite to ensure that all is well because of grave robbings happening within the area. Obviously, everything goes good. They leave. They end up picking up a hitchhiker along the way. This hitchhiker is mentally unstable, snaps a photo of them. They don't want to buy the photo from him, so he sets it on fire, uses a straight razor, cuts Franklin. They throw him out, whatever. So they get to a gas station, and we have a specific character there. I will bring up later. But they say, hey, you're out of gas. Believably so, depending on the deals on gas. I could believe it. But they drive off, eventually break down. And that's when the real fun comes into play. And that's where people just start getting hacked up left and right. We're not going to focus too much on that at this moment. We're going to bring that up later. But we get to finally where it comes to being Sally being our final girl, and more importantly, one of the first final girls of all time for horror. And arguably probably one of my top of all time as well. But she ends up escaping, and then we get the infamous scene at the end of the film with Leatherface dancing, if you would, spinning around in the sun and accepting defeat. And that's pretty much about it. There is a fantastic documentary on this film called The Shocking Truth. It came out with an anniversary steelbook edition of this film, which if you do not have, I would highly recommend picking up and watching that documentary. There is a lot behind this film. There was a lot of financial issues surrounding the film, a lot of extortion with that, just the grueling shoots they had. The dinner scene alone was about 36 hours. I can't imagine having to scream for 36 straight hours. That sounds terrible. But again, go check it out. Also watch the movie if you haven't. It's phenomenal. Yeah, maybe not so much now whereas the scare factor is concerned, but just think back to the time it came out. It was truly terrifying. But it is one that went down in history and one that is definitely in my top 5 of all-time horror films. Now we're going to move on to the actual deal. Mr. Ed Gein, the butcher of Plainfield, Wisconsin. He gained widespread notoriety in the 50s surrounding 2 murders that he had actually done, and also being a grave robber at the end of the day. Initially was unfit to stand trial, and was confined to a mental health institution. About 10 years after being incarcerated, they were stated that he was competent to stand trial, and he was inevitably found guilty of one of the 2 murders. And he was found legally insane, remanded to a psychiatric institution where he then died of respiratory failure. And that was on July 26th, 1984 at 77 years old. But why would I pick Ed Gein to go up against Leatherface? Well, let's see. He, yes, to an extent, also helped create Leatherface. Tobe Hooper has stated multiple times that the stories of Ed Gein used to be used against him to be scared from his family. And all about the guy with the skin furniture, and it terrified him, and that's what actually brought us the film that we know. But yeah, I said skin furniture. It's kind of gross, right? Doesn't uphold any resale value whatsoever. Can't imagine. It probably starts to stink. Yeah. But a little bit about Ed Gein particularly. I gave kind of a brief overview, but we're not going to take away from him. He's just as important in this fight as our serial killer from the film. But he had a very overbearing mother named Augusta. She lived with them in an isolated 155-acre farm out in Plainfield, Wisconsin in the 50s. Gein had one brother, and his mother used to read to them from the Bible every afternoon, usually selecting verses from Older Testaments, books of Revelation concerning death, murder, divine retributions. But she always made a fact to preach to her boys about the terrible things of the world, the evils of drinking, and her true belief that all women were just naturally promiscuous, terrible instruments of the devil, if you would, was what she also was most notably said. And she bestowed this upon her boys. A little bit later in life, Gein's father passed away from heart failure caused by his alcoholism that he had. His little brother Henry in 1944 actually passed away. They were burning marsh vegetation on their properties. Fire kind of got out of control. Apparently, when they found his brother's body, because he reported his brother was missing when they got away, they found the body later on, but he had bruises on his head. There's been speculation that there may have been foul play with Gein being the reason that he had died and not the actual fire. There's nothing that can actually corroborate the story that I haven't been able to find yet. If you personally have something that is of a notable source, feel free to drop it in the comments below. I would love to read it. My knowledge here is not 1000%. This is mainly what I've seen. And so this left Gein alone with his very overbearing mother, who he saw as his best friend, his one true love, if you would. And she ended up passing away from a stroke. She died December 29th of 1945. He was so devastated by her death, and there is actually a true crime novelist that wrote and quoted specifically that he had lost his only friend and one true love, and that he was absolutely alone in the world. This is what many believe drove him to start enacting upon the grave robbing, and eventually leading to murder when the grave robbing was not enough. When he he has been known for about 40 different grave robbings. In these grave robbings, he stated that he was in a sort of daze, if you would, and he would come to and leave the grave in perfect condition and go about his way. But the times that he hadn't come to, it was known that he was digging up the graves of recently buried middle-aged women that resembled his mother, and then he would take prizes back with him, various body parts, sometimes leave things behind, such as the jewelry. One gravesite, he actually left his crowbar that he used to break open the coffin. Eventually, he ended up taking his psychosis into actual murder. With that, he has only had 2 kills total. The one being a tavern owner in 1954, Mary Hogan, and a hardware store owner, Bernice Warden, in 1957, whom her murder is the one that got him found guilty of the murders. And well, as far as that's concerned, the Worden murder is just awful. There's actually photos of it online. When the officers came into the shed on his property, they found her hung upside down, crossbarred her ankles and ropes around her wrists. Her torso was cut out, dressed like you would a deer from hunting. She had been shot with his .22 caliber rifle, but the mutilations were done post-mortem. Against speculations that I've seen in multiple places and in films, he did not actually have sexual relations with the bodies, because he said in trial they smelled too bad. It's a common misconception. People try to state that he did that. No, not at all. However, he did like to make furniture out of the bodies, and when they searched the house, the authorities found just a plethora of just, you name it, they had it. There was a wastebasket made of human skin. There was whole human bones and fragments found. He used skulls as bedposts. He made bowls from human skulls. They actually found Mary Hogan's skull in a box. And when he was questioned about her murder, he did mention and admit to doing so, but he states that the details of the murder he doesn't remember. There's a lot of speculation on that, as well as he was playing the authorities during the questioning. There's some that actually believe it. For one, I would like to think that if he did it, it was his first. And if you read anywhere, the first is the one that all of them remember. But so yeah, there's everything you could think of. Pretty gross. As we mentioned in the beginning, he ended up not being able to stand fit for trial. Initially, it was about 10 years after he had been arrested, where he actually went to trial, was found guilty of the murder of Bernice Worden from 1957, as we previously mentioned, and he was deemed insane and locked away in a mental health institution where he spent the rest of his life until he passed away at 77 years old on July 26, 1984. His gravesite is currently unmarked, not unknown. The gravestone had actually went missing in about the year 2000. It was recovered about a year later near Seattle. How it got from here to way out that way is beyond me. Washington, man. But we've had enough of the breakdowns. Let's move on to the point system. Let's see who would really take the win here. All right. So, with this, I had given each one of them the ability to make 6 points in total. And this was based off a few different factors. But so we're starting off with a fair 6 each. I'm not going to get into the details exactly. We're going to go ahead and take away points starting now. So with that being said, Gein is losing a point. Why he's losing a point off the bat? He was building a suit, a women's suit, to literally crawl into his mother's skin and become his mother, as he had been quoted in trial. But I've done a lot of research on this. I haven't found any proof that he actually wore said suit. There are film adaptations of him that I feel used it as just a shock factor. But there's nothing that says that he has, and no proof that he has. Whereas Leatherface, he followed through, and we're all about follow through here. That will be the mantra of the channel's follow through. He wore everything he made. He wore it straight off of the victim. He killed Jerry 46 minutes into the film with a sledgehammer, cut his face off, and wore it. And he actually made what was the most iconic face, I feel, in that film, which is what we deem as the pretty woman face in the horror community. And he made it out of Jerry's face. And Jerry was actually Sally's boyfriend. So how messed up is that, to be bound to a chair at the end of this film and you're looking at, your love. But it's not his face. Oh well. So moving on with the points, I am going to also deduct a point from Leatherface. Why am I deducting a point from Leatherface, do you ask? Well, he had a survivor at the end of his film, being Sally Hardesty. Sally breaks through the window of the kitchen and runs out from the infamous dinner scene, being chased by our hitchhiker, and he ends up getting hit by a truck. The driver that hits him comes out and attempts to help Sally and get her out of there. Takes a wrench out of his passenger seat, hits Leatherface in the head with it. He falls down and accidentally puts his leg saw through his leg, causing him to be limp. And at this point, a pickup truck pulls up, sees this going on. Sally just jumps in the truck and says bye, and leaves the guy that not only ran over our hitchhiker from the beginning of the film and attempted to save her life, she leaves him to run down this open street. Why he would just continue to run is beyond me. Get in that truck and go, man. Can we say ungrateful? Like, yeah, we're blood-drenched, and yeah, we're screaming. We just went through some terrible shit. But, really? Okay. But, yeah, again, we're talking about follow-through here. And one survivor can't be had. So, but how we're also factoring the kills on this channel. I am going to be doing 2-to-1 ratios as far as kills are concerned. 2 on screen to 1 actual kill. So, with that being said, Leatherface did win on that sense. But, so, we are at 5 points each. We have a straight tie. So what are we going to do about that exactly? Well, I've been thinking, and I figured I'd bring in a friend of mine. So please welcome the Honorable Harold J. Bones. And so Harold, what do you have to say about this? Who do you think would win in this? Oh, silly me. He's dead. So what happens here? That's where you guys come in. This is where the fun of this channel is going to come in, exactly. I'm going to give you guys the information. You can also go ahead and watch the films. You can do the searches online. You can do whatever you'd like to also help fight your cause. Get on your soapbox, if you would. You guys are truly the ones that are going to decide the victors here. If it were my decision in this, I would side with Leatherface. Simply on the fact, brutal killer and just disgusting. Just a terrible human being. Not discrediting Mr. Gein whatsoever, but just the sheer brutality of the murders in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the fact that he wears the victims shortly after killing them. As a whole, he would be my victor. But I want you guys to be involved. So feel free to get in on the community tab. We're going to have an upvote there where you can choose your winner there. Feel free to email me at codenamescreamtube@gmail.com and give me your winner. You can also find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. You have multiple avenues to stake your claim and tell me who decides to win. After a week, I'm going to go ahead and compile all the votes. And the next episode, I will announce our winner from this one. And for our next episode, whomever will advance from that will be the one that takes on Leatherface. I'm not going to tell you who's next episode, though. That's going to be the part of this that gets real fun. You guys are going in blind with this. You have no idea who I'm putting up against who. You're just going to help me advance the people. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun when this is all said and done. So feel free to chime in starting now. But we'll have drops every week on Tuesdays and Thursdays at midnight. So for all you night owls, or if you're grabbing lunch and if you think you can keep it down with all the information that you're given, more power to you. So, scare you later, YouTube.